Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement interview with expert series. I'm Dori Mintzer, owner of Revolutionize Retirement and your host for the series. So I am so delighted today to have Renée Rosenberg, who's a friend and colleague of mine over many years. She's been with us once before, and she's with us again now. I want to just tell you a little about Renée, and then we'll get going. Renée Lee Rosenberg is a positivity pro. She's a career management counselor, licensed mental health counselor, emotional intelligence coach, and intergenerational communication speaker who works with organizations and individuals to foster engagement, multi-generational understanding, being, and career happiness at work. She's an 18-year member of the National Speakers Association of the United States. She presents virtually and in person and has been interviewed in media, print, and online, things such as the ABC, Eyewitness News, MSNBC, Italian TV, Forbes.com, and many others. She lived in Japan in the 1980s, where she studied Japanese metal making, worked for fashion designer Kanzai Yamamoto, and met David Bowie. We'll ask all about these things as we progress in the interview. While there, she learned valuable Japanese insights and perspectives for sustaining happiness and well-being, which she incorporates in her national and international presentations, as well as in her virtual and in-person career counseling practice. Her book, Achieving the Good Life After 50, has helped many overcome the stresses of aging and approaching retirement. Clients describe Renée, a native New Yorker, as passionate, authentic, inspiring, and a joy to be with and work with. So I am so delighted to have Renée with me. We've actually done some workshops together over the years, and I can attest to her having a good sense of humor and being filled with a lot of energy and excitement and a lot of ideas. So, Renée, welcome. Tell us a little.
I'm equally delighted to be here.
Oh, thank you. So tell us a little about what got you interested in Japan and a little about why Japan's so important, and then we'll start talking about much of the learning that you've had that you've integrated. And I know many people on the call have an interest in Japan. It's one of the blue zones. So maybe tell us a little about that background and what got you interested in going there.
Yeah, my history goes back quite a number of years, as you might know, Dory. I first became interested in Japan in the late 1960s, and I have to, I'd say, blame it on or just go back to a movie that I saw when I was in graduate school called Ikigai, which means to live. And I was so impressed by this movie and by the Japanese culture and about the message. It was a movie by Akira Kurosawa, who became one of my very favorite directors after that. And it got me so excited that I felt I had to go to Japan and learn more about the culture. And so in 1970, I picked myself up, left my job at the time that I had just gotten. I had been working in the school system for 1 year and decided this wasn't for me. And little did I know that it really didn't meet my passion and my purpose, which is the Ikigai, which I will be talking about. And so I went to Japan in the 1970s, and I spent a year there, living and learning, studying metal making. At the time I was a jeweler, and I was studying how to make Japanese metal. And it was a very exciting time for me. And I was also learning about a Japanese concept that I didn't realize would play a big part and a big role in the type of work that I did later with clients. And the concept was kintsugi, which is putting pieces together, broken pieces of pottery, putting them together with a lacquer that is gold so that you create something beautiful from something that's been broken. So
Can you say again what that's called? Just because it got muffled a little.
I will spell it for people if you'd like to take notes and write it down and look it up. Kintsugi. Kintsugi.
Thank you.
There's no T in it. I don't pronounce the T. And little did I know that this would be something that I would be using, again, later on in my career with my clients. So I was in Japan in the 70s, and I then came back to New York and met some people at Mama, which was the Japanese group that was performing there, and they introduced me to an incredible man named Kansai Yamamoto, who invited me to come back to Japan and to work with him. So that was pretty exciting. I had no idea what I'd be doing. It turned out that he was the designer of David Bowie's costume. I didn't know it at the time, Dory, but I found out very quickly when I got to Japan. There was David Bowie. I didn't have much interaction with him, actually, because I think I stood there with my mouth open most of the time.
So do you want to share what he was like, or what it was like suddenly going there and meeting him?
Now he seemed, it's a memory, a long lost memory, but I every now and then I remember that he was just he was very quiet and very polite and a lovely man, just lovely. And the one thing I do remember is that he didn't like to fly. And so he came on the Orient Express, however that was. He got there, but I remember knowing about that and that he took it back also back to London, back to his home. But it was an exciting time. And then in 1973, I came over with Kansai Yamamoto to the Bowie concert. I think it was the Aladdin Sane concert that was at the Radio City Music Hall in 1973. And that's when Kansai's costumes were used on the stage by David Bowie. And I got a seat in the front row. So that was pretty exciting.
So then you went back in the 1980s and were working. What were you doing then? And did you go back alone or with other people?
Yeah, I did go back in the 1980s. I, at that time, was still very smitten with the Japanese culture and with the language and what I was learning about it, and decided to go back and live there again. And I was going to visit friends who actually never got there, so I was alone most of the time. But I developed an opportunity to really be able to work there and to get to know people. And in 1982, while I was there, this new Japanese concept was talked about in the English language newspaper, which was called, let me see, what was that one again? That was Kaizen. Was in 1982. It was developed by an American, and it was called an idea. Actually, it wasn't the Kaizen. Sorry, I'm getting confused with my Japanese concept. It was the concept that has now become so popular here in the States, and that was Shinjin Yoku in 1982, was developed by the Ministry of Agriculture. The Kaizen came a little later. Actually, it came earlier, but not while I was there. But the Shinjin Yoku, and I will spell this one for the audience also, Shinrin, Shinrin Yoku, Yoku. And in 1982, again, this was written up in the English language newspaper and the Japanese newspaper. But I had an opportunity to read about what they were talking about and what they were developing. And it was called, in English, Bathing in Nature, or forest bathing, which has become so popular now in the States. It took a long time to get over here, which I think is pretty remarkable, because this was so popular back in the 1980s in Japan. They had done research on this particular concept and discovered that it really helped to lower people's stress and to help people have a better attitude for their health and to take better care of themselves if they went to walk in the forest.
So can you elaborate just on what that actually means? Because I know it is an interesting term. And what actually is forest bathing?
It is interesting. And when you first hear it, what do you first think of, Dory?
If you take it very concretely, it's, do you go bathe in the forest, or do you bathe in the metaphoric of just taking it all in and being there and being one with it, or meditating? That it can evoke all kinds of feelings, metaphorically, symbolically, spiritually, as well as very concretely.
Yes, so many people, when they hear forest bathing and when I tell them about it, or when they read about it, oh, I'm going to be bathing in the forest? How is that going to happen? I'm not taking my clothes off because I have to take the clothes off. No, you don't. It means about it. Yes, it's a metaphor for being calm and taking care of yourself and being embraced by trees. And I have always loved trees. When I was a young child, all I did was draw trees. They weren't very good, but they were wonderful drawings. And I really enjoyed doing that. And so forest bathing is about being in nature, being around nature and taking care of yourself, leaving the urban environment in the best way that you can, and being around trees and absorbing the calmness of the birds. It's using your senses, basically, listening to the birds, smelling the fresh air, hearing the breeze and the wind in the trees. All of that encompasses this forest bathing.
Sounds lovely. Did you spend time then when you were there in the 80s, and have you brought that back home for both yourself and your clients?
Not when I came back, not immediately, no. But I did use it with clients because many people had asked me, how do you do this if you're in the city, if you're in an urban environment? How can you go into nature? And as you know, there's many parks in Boston and there's many parks in New York. So just go and set a regular schedule to visit a park. And if it's a small park, just sit in nature. You don't have to be walking. And if you go into the forest, you can sit on a bench. You don't have to be walking through it. It's just the idea of absorbing the peace and the calm of trees and the birds again and the breeze. So you can do this if you're in an urban setting or if you're in near the country. I did use it years later with my clients because I had found in studying about this that if you just view pictures of trees and pictures of forests, that can be equally as calming for people. And so I would put pictures up around my office of forest scenes and tree scenes because I love those. I've always loved them. And I would change them periodically so that when my clients would come in, they would observe them and we'd chat about them, and we could spend some time looking at them and calming down. And it had a really important effect. But I didn't use any of this immediately. I also learned when I was in Japan that there was another concept that was created for businesses called Kaizen, Kaizen. And Zen is translated as good, and K is translated as change. And this was actually created, this is sort of funny story, this was not created by the Japanese. It was created by a man named W. Edward Deming right after World War II. And he was an engineer who believed that if people could do continuous increment improvements in industry, that this would help the Japanese build up their industry again. He created this program, which then was adopted by individuals. And while I was in Japan, I also learned about how continuous incremental improvement can really help people to change and to set a goal, to take action, but to work very slowly and with small changes. And when I was working with my clients and did adapt this as one of the concepts that I used in my roadmap, I would ask people to make a very small change so that they wouldn't procrastinate. Making a small change, which is what Kaizen is about, that it's easy to do and not to forget about. And so this was a very powerful concept that I also used later on with my clients.
Before we get into some of the other, concepts, how did you learn these things? Was it just by living with people there? Was it studying it when you were? How did you begin to learn about Japanese culture and some of these really important spiritual components, I think, of concepts of well-being.
I've always been intrigued, as I mentioned, since my years in graduate school, and I saw that first Japanese movie, intrigued with the Japanese culture. And when I went to Japan, I became intrigued with the samurai culture. And I would go see samurai movies. And when I came back to New York, there was a samurai festival right near at the Elgin Theater, which is right near where I lived, near Soho. And I would go and see all the movies and absorb the culture, which was so different from the American culture. And it just spoke to me. It was something that I saw as a thing of beauty. And some of these concepts, some of these philosophies were ancient. They existed back in the 7th and 9th century. Not all of them, as I mentioned, some of them were developed much later. But these were people there really were so much more concerned with well-being and health and longevity. And that was why I did visit Okinawa, but I visited it before the Blue Zone was even a recognized term. I actually went there in the 1980s. And I just wanted to learn as much as I could and absorb as much as I could. So it was sort of speaking to people. It was sort of meeting people. It was sort of asking questions and just living there within the culture and absorbing what I could. And my trip to Okinawa was extremely interesting. It was very short, and I didn't know about blue zones, but I knew that it was a beautiful place to live. And there were many people there who were much older than other people in other parts of the world. But I didn't know, again, about the blue zone until much later when the book came out. I believe that was in 1908.
When did the book come out?
I think in 1908, Joy. The first
Blue
book
Zone?
about the blue.
Oh, really? Can you explain? Many people probably know about the Blue Zone and Okinawa being one of the Blue Zone areas. It might be helpful for some of the listeners if you could explain a little of what that concept is about. And I know Dan Buettner, as you just mentioned his name, has brought it more recently into people's awareness. But can you just tell a little about it and what your experience was experiencing that and being part of it when you were there?
Sure. As I mentioned, I was there way before Dan Buettner wrote his book. But it was a place that I really wanted to visit because I had heard so much about it from people talking about it when I was living in Tokyo. Okinawa is one of 5 designated places around the world where there are high levels of centenarians. Those are people over 100. And I think people now are actually, I'm wondering if they're living even longer than that, into 100, because people are living older even in our culture. But in the days when he discovered it and he went over there and wrote a book, which was in, I think it was 2008, it was about how people live longer based on a sense of purpose, of helping others, of giving back to society, and eating well and taking care of their life. And basically, it was the same concept as Ikigai, which was a movie that I saw, which is To Live. And it was based on an ancient Japanese philosophy, Ikigai, which is a reason for living, a reason for getting up in the morning. And when he wrote his book, I didn't really know about his Blue Zone at the time, Joy, but I did read about it here, and I did use it in working with my clients. And it was about people having a purpose, even in retirement, that people in Okinawa didn't see retirement as giving up, but as a continuation of a purpose for living and a purpose for life, and a reason to get up every morning. And it was based on these 4 concepts of doing what you love, doing what you're good at, giving back to the world, basically your mission. And this could be just giving back to one person, showing gratitude. And it also mentioned getting paid. It fit very well into the career counseling process because who wanted to get paid.
No, it fits quite well into it. And it is interesting. There's one Blue Zone area in the United States, which is Loma Linda, California. I think that's the one here. And there, as you said, there are just a few around the world. And it is interesting that it wasn't really known back then, but discovering it sounds like is so nice. And part of what I always love about traveling and adventure is just being curious and meeting people and learning about it. And it sounds like you were immersed in some of these Japanese concepts for well-being, which is so nice. Expand more on them, if you will, or other parts that really influenced you, because you were there a long time ago and it sounds really integrated this into your life and your work. And so we just want to learn more about that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was able to do that, not when I first came back, but I said I was there in the 80s and was able to visit Okinawa, was able to learn more about these concepts. But I began to use them later when I was working with clients in the teachers union. And I realized that the Japanese concepts were a wonderful way to introduce to my counseling practice. When I worked with the teachers, these were teachers, I'll tell you a little bit about what I did. I worked with teachers who were not happy, that didn't have any Ikigai in their life. They didn't have a reason for being or a life purpose. And most of them didn't really want to get up in the morning and go to work. This is the problem when you look at how the people in Okinawa would live a long, healthy life. And here were teachers who were not living a wealthy, happy life. And I would use the process to help them get through some of their problems. And because they would come to talk to me, and most of the time they were so depressed or so angry, there was so much negativity that they really weren't open to any kind of counseling process. And as Dory, I'm not a therapist. I am a mental health counselor. So I would deal with mental health issues, but not really with what was wrong and try to get people to be better through therapy, because that's not what my goal was. That's not what my training is. But I found that when I used these Japanese concepts and developed for them a roadmap to follow, that it was exotic for them. It was different. It got them interested in something outside of themselves and outside of complaining and being angry and being more curious. And with the curiosity, they were more open to learning what they could do to help themselves to become happier and to develop their ikigai, their reason for being. And for example, one of my clients, the teacher, Bill, he was thinking of retiring, but he was so unhappy in teaching and his work that he was so worried that if he retired, he would just continue to be unhappy and not know what to do because he couldn't think of anything else. Even when we worked on an assessment, he was blank on what was important. And when we talked about the reason for being and his life purpose and what made him happy, he thought that he really loved taking pictures and being a photographer as a hobby. And he at that time was being influenced by his children to come live with them in California, to leave New York when he retired. And he felt that wasn't right. It didn't fit right with his life purpose. And he decided that he would take small incremental steps, which is Kaizen, taking these incremental steps for improvement. So he incorporated some of these philosophies into the practice of what he was doing with me. And he decided he would start exploring where he could go and travel and take photographs of trees, because he had been looking at the other concept, which he really thought was really wonderful, of Shinrin Yoku. So we combined all of these concepts, these Japanese concepts, into his roadmap for well-being. And he ultimately left the States, took off for 1 year to travel, was photographing forests in different places. He did his research. He took small steps to decide what he would do. I had given him the name of a wonderful travel organization, which I'd love to share with people, called Servas, Servas.
Can you spell it again? Every once in a while, you're not quite as clear. So just say again the name and spell it.
Oh, absolutely. It was very important to get. Servas, Servas, which means to serve, which was created after World War II by a gentleman in Sweden who believed if people got to know each other on a personal basis, that there wouldn't be any more war. So it's a very nice concept. So I introduced Bill to Servas, and he researched and found people in the areas where he wanted to travel and connected with them. There's no money exchanged. You can stay with people in their homes. They invite you to stay with them for 2 nights only. But they tell you about their culture, about their history. And he was very excited to do that in his newly found retirement, not to go live with his children in California, but to still be an active, engaged person who knew his purpose when he woke up in the morning. So these Japanese concepts were very important to him. He came back after a year, had a wonderful show in a gallery in New York of trees and forests, and spoke about the Japanese philosophy of Shinrin Yoku, and then went on to give back by teaching within a community center, teaching photography to young people. It was a full, yes, it was lovely. A full concept of using this groundwork of the Japanese concept to develop a roadmap for his life.
Yeah. Is this organization, Servas, still around?
Yes, it is. It's very active, and it's international. And I encourage those on the call. They'll probably be getting a lot more people now who are interested, which is great. It's a wonderful organization. It's about giving back. It's about giving back to travelers who are visiting. You can be a traveler or you can be a host. And for many years, I was a host in the city. And Jory, my apartment at that time was 2 rooms.
I have stayed there.
Yes, you did.
It's a wonderful location, and it's, Let's get back to the 5 Japanese, I think there are like 5 Japanese concepts that you wanted to share, and you've mentioned a few. And I think in each case, it's good to spell it as well as say it so people can, and then maybe just tell us what they mean, and then let's talk more about ways people can think about, ways you've integrated it with your clients, but also ways people can think about incorporating it into their own lives too.
Absolutely. The first one is Ikigai, Ikigai. And Ikigai comes from Ikiru, Ikiru, which means to live. And that was the name of the first film that I saw, the first Japanese movie.
Right.
And I encourage those of you on the call who don't know it and haven't seen it. It was a very early Akira Kurosawa film that totally changed my life and introduced me to the Japanese culture. A very moving, beautiful film. And Ikiru means to live, and Gei, which is the end of Ikigai, is reason. So it's giving a reason for being, your life purpose, finding out what's important and moving toward it. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 pieces to it and 4 areas of the life that you need to be looking at. It's what you love to do, what you're good at, what the world needs, which is, again, giving back. It's a gratitude, helping others, and what you get paid for. It's very well fit into the concept of work and career counseling. But doing what you love is the most important piece. It's finding out what that is. What is your passion? What is your mission? What's important to you at the present? And taking small steps to get there. And
I love the concept of small steps because, in a sense, overwhelm is when you're trying to do too much. And so this Japanese concept, which I think fits just with any kind of coaching model, is little steps to both improve, but also a sense of mastery. And then once you've improved or mastered something, it's an incentive to keep going. And I think it's a wonderful concept.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Joy, because in our culture, we move too quickly. And we're too busy. And in these Japanese concepts, it's all about slowing down, being more mindful where you are at the present moment, and then taking steps to move forward. But again, small steps, which is what so many of these principles and these concepts are really about. Ikigai is to take small steps to move toward what gives you your life purpose. And this is what, and I do have a list of some really wonderful books that I will give you that you send out to people on the call. One of them that was written just recently in 2023, and it's Ikigai, the Japanese secret to a happy, long life. And I love the title. Don't we all want that? Do we want happiness? Do we want a long life? And this was written by Lieberman and Garcia, and I will send you the links to all of these.
Oh, great. Okay.
So the next one was that I talked about just recently is the Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing and bathing in nature. And this is really so easy to do for so many of us who live in an urban culture and can't get out into nature. Although I do suggest that those of you on the call, if you have a park that's nearby that you can walk to or just get to very easily, to schedule a routine to visit the park and just sit in nature for a little while. They found in Japan that this has amazing effects on your health and well-being. So you don't even know what's happening. And I always like this. I thought this was interesting. They discovered that people's blood pressure was lowered, that their stress hormone, cortisol, was lowered, and that their general health improved when they would go into the forest and be with nature. So just sitting in nature can do wonders for you without really knowing that you're so taking care of yourself and healing yourself. And pictures, having pictures posted, I would encourage my clients to look through magazines or take pictures of trees and post them on their refrigerator so that when they were up on the bathroom mirror, somewhere where they could see it, so that when they would look at it, it would actually help to calm them and reduce stress.
And I think it's such wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful advice, and I think more and more, and there are more wonderful books around too, of just how we are part of the universe, and all species are part of it. And being out in nature, just as you're saying, it can slow us down, being more mindful, and realizing it's humbling kind of thing that we're just one species of many, and there's this interconnection in the world. And it sounds like so many of these concepts speak to that and are wonderful kind of extensions and articulations of that.
Absolutely. And we don't even realize it. And this calmness and this well-being just happens so easily without much effort if we're just present and mindful of what we need to do and mindful of nature around us. Very important to us.
Can you spell, one of the questions is, can you spell again the word for the art of mending broken pottery with gold?
That's my favorite one. It's really what started. It's my favorite, actually. My favorite ancient. It's an ancient concept. It started by a shogun in the 16th or 17th century of mending things that were broken, and the spelling is K-I-N-T-S-U-G-I.
So I'm going to say it again in case. So K-I-N-T-S-U-G-I, but the T is silent when you speak it, right?
It is silent.
Okay.
Kintsugi. And there's a wonderful book that was written on Kintsugi called Embrace, and I will get this to you, Dory, Embrace Your Imperfections and Find Happiness in the Japanese way. So many of these concepts are now being adopted by our culture. And forest bathing actually is being written up in the New York Times. I read about it in the Wall Street Journal. So it's becoming mainstream, and people are knowing about it, which is such a healthy thing for us. It's so good.
No, absolutely. So what are some of the other concepts that we should learn about and know?
And I'll spell this one again, the one that I mentioned earlier, Kaizen, Kaizen, which means good change. And this talks about incremental improvements, very slow, small, incremental improvements to change.
Right.
So it's not about, and this, in our culture, we want to change quickly. And the people that would come see me, the teachers who I worked with, they wanted out. They didn't want to be in the school system any longer. They didn't want to be teaching anymore, but they didn't know how. And they wanted to jump quickly. And this Japanese philosophy of Keizen says, no. It's continuous incremental improvements and change, small incremental steps. And when you do that, you're more aware of the actions, you make more gradual adjustments, and it really helps your well-being to be aware of how you can strive to change and do something differently. So it's a slowing down process, actually.
Right.
And it is something that I work with in the roadmap with my clients is what small steps can you take to get where you need to go? And what would make you happy? So it was really a discovery process of breaking down larger goals into smaller manageable tasks.
Right.
And as I mentioned, what's really interesting, Dory, this was created by a man after World War II to help the Japan companies in the industry get back into their productivity and to get more engaged. And his name was W. Edward Deming, who was an engineer, an American engineer. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Say his name again. Again, sometimes the names and words. W-A-N?
W. Edward Deming. D-E-M-I-N-G-S. Edward Deming.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry if some of it gets a little muddled. I'm actually in the midst of the woods up in my country home. So it may should calm you, Dory, on influencing the reception. So the next one is one that I've always also really enjoyed telling people about and working with. And and I'm going to spell this one again. It's Wabi Sabi. And I just love the name.
Yeah.
It's W-A-B-I, and the next word is S-A-B-I, Wabi Sabi.
It sounds great, so tell us about it.
and this is also, they all blend together. This one also is about mindfulness and embracing imperfection, and about impermanence and simplicity. And it's about finding beauty in what's imperfect and appreciating the fleeting nature of life. And this really speaks to thinking about aging and the aging process and how to really be there at your fullest and be present and be mindful. And it's really to embrace that aging is a process that we all move through, and to unclutter your mind and to be in the present moment. It's a beautiful metaphor for resilience. And it combines this, my favorite one, with this, the kintsugi, K-I-N-T-S-U-G-I. That combines, they work together. The kintsugi is about mending broken pieces. And it's about putting together things that have hurt you or problems. And it's about healing. It's a metaphor for healing. And it's actually a very concrete concept because it's about breaking pieces. So if you've ever broken anything, Joy, in your house, any pottery that you've loved, what have you done with it usually?
I usually try to glue it together, but so I do try to bend, or you throw it out.
Yeah, I think your first is really an attempt at kintsugi.
At what?
It's really an attempt to put the pieces together.
Put it together.
Yeah, to glue it together. But in kintsugi, it's to glue the pieces together with gold lacquer and glue. There's gold dust in the lacquer. And so it becomes to put pieces together into something that's different, but still functional and a different kind of beauty. It's a beautiful metaphor for healing and for taking care of ourselves as we age.
Yeah, it really is a beautiful metaphor of just aging and the losses of aging, but we have to put ourselves back together in different ways. And yeah, I like that.
And there's a wonderful book that was written by a French woman, Celine Santini. And again, I will give you this list. And it's called Finding Strength in Imperfection.
Say it
He
again.
talks about kintsugi,
Kintsugi.
finding in imperfection.
Okay. Yep.
And he talks about using this Japanese philosophy of healing and putting pieces together in terms of helping her go through her divorce.
Oh, great. I want to integrate a couple of questions if I can. Oh, well, you're going to say something else before I integrate a couple of other questions? What?
I'm ready for your question.
Oh, okay. Rosemary from Florida says, I'm understanding the concept of having purpose in your life to live a long and happy life, which seems to be a focus of taking care of yourself. And she wonders, is there a concept in Japanese culture of purpose in serving others through volunteerism? She said she's not aware of a culture of volunteerism in Japanese culture. I wonder if you could speak to that?
I'm not sure if volunteerism is actually what they call it in Japan, but it's a giving back, it's taking care of others, and there is a very strong area in people's lives who live with Ikigai, with this reason for being in the life purpose. And one of the areas of Ikigai, one of the 4 areas, is giving what the world needs. What is your mission? How do you give back? What do you do for us? And this is one of the things that they found in the Blue Zone, is that people there are helping others, are getting up. The reason for being many times is to feed their family, to help their family in their well-being, to help others. Maybe it's not volunteerism, but it is helping others, and that is a very concept in Ikigai and the reason for being.
The other thing that hits me, just thinking about this question from Rosemary and your response, is in Japan, elders are, my understanding is, if it's still the case, more revered and taken care of, but more revered and have a place. I think maybe you spoke about that a little bit earlier on. Less, although we're trying to get people to see that more and kind of work against the ageism in our country. But I know it was a number of decades ago that you were there, but what was your sense of how elders were dealt with or respected or not respected or whatever in Japanese culture?
Absolutely, very much revered and very much respected. And just to give you an example that explains it all, was on a Japanese train, when there are elderly people in the train, no one will run to sit down. They will save the seat for that person. And I would say this is a great contrast to the New York City subway, where everyone runs to sit down to grab that seat. And they don't look around and see if there's someone elderly or old in the car and offer their seat to them. But in Japan, it's not even offering, it's an understood that the seat is for the person who's older. You don't sit down. And I noticed that was a big contrast to what I've observed in New York. Although I'm seeing, and I don't know, maybe it's because my hair is now turning a different color. More people are giving me seats on the subway.
It is interesting. I know for myself, I haven't taken the subway very often since COVID started, but even before that, people would be offering me seats, and at first I would no, and then depending on my energy level, I would say thank you, and I would happily accept it. So it is interesting. Maybe it's slowly starting. Okay.
It is.
Oh, yeah. So Thomas from Detroit says, hello, Renee. Can you touch on the apparent paradox of striving for fulfillment in one's work and life versus the workaholic attitude? So that's his main question. And then he adds as a comment, by the way, when he was in Japan and visited Kyoto, he happened upon Shodenji Temple. It's a smaller temple situated in a forest where David Bowie went to meditate early in life and returned later when he was in his final stages of his battle with liver cancer. It was a bit out of the way, he said, but a very peaceful place worth the visit. So that was the comment. But then again, the question is, can you touch on the apparent paradox of striving for fulfillment in one's work and in one's work and life versus the workaholic attitude?
Mm. Yeah, it is. And certainly in Japan, we've always known them to be a workaholic society also, where people just work so hard that they would get sick and actually die on the job. There's stories that would circulate. But things have changed greatly. And in terms of being a workaholic, I would use that with my clients who were workaholics and say, what can you do to bring some work-life balance into your life so that you can use some of these, look at these Japanese concepts to help you to do that. And one thing that I've advised my clients to do who were working, eating their lunch at work, which was a very bad thing, would be to take a regular lunch break and go out and walk, or to stand up and walk around the office, go for get a drink of water, not sit at your desk for so long. That we can be aware. Workaholic is it's a symptom that we create by not learning how to take care of ourselves, even in a stressful job. What can one do when they're feeling super stressed? You can look at some of these Japanese concepts and take small little steps to change, small incremental steps that really don't look like you're doing much to change the work you're doing, but do a lot to change your own attitude and your own way that you're dealing with the work. So it might be, again, my client who never went out to lunch, he started to go out on lunch breaks and just take walks. And it helped him enormously to go back and work. And he was a lawyer, and it was very hard. Many lawyers work very hard and are workaholics. And the lunch breaks really helped him enormously.
Absolutely.
So being aware of what they need to do. And who else is in better charge of ourselves but ourselves and taking care of ourselves?
Which segues beautifully into Meg from Cambridge's comment, which she says, I consider sitting or walking in meditation a form of meditation, which also has similar health benefits. I'm loving your story, Renée, and your integration of Japanese wisdom into your work. Kintsugi and wabi-sabi are my favorites, too.
Yeah. Thank you, Meg.
And Beverly from New Jersey says, given your extensive background and strong skill set, your company organization seems more than the name Positivity Pro. How did you arrive at this name? And she also says, thank you for the info today.
Thank you.
Comment on that?
Yes. Thank you for that question. Actually, I started my business, quite a number of years ago, and I knew I needed a name. And I was working with clients mostly who were really unhappy and negative and would come to see me angry, as I mentioned, so many of the teachers were, and people upset about their work and their life. And it was very hard to get them to function and to focus on counseling, on the career counseling that I was offering them. So I decided that if I called myself Positivity Pro, that they would know beforehand that I was going to deal with positivity and not with negativity. And it worked. People would come in and they would say to me jokingly, oh, you're the Positivity Pro. I'm not so positive. I'm pretty negative. And I said, we're going to change that. And that's how I decided on the name, so that people would know what I was about. But otherwise, they shouldn't come see me, because if they weren't ready to become positive, then there isn't much work that we could have done together.
Nice. But at the moment, those are the questions that we've had, but I invite others to go to the event page and submit some others. But so back to Japanese culture and the self-care, slowing down, small steps, embracing our imperfection. They're all such wonderful concepts that I do think people are trying to embrace more. But more to say, if you have, Renée, of just other aspects that really captivated you when you were in Japan that you've integrated both into your life and work that would be helpful to add here for the listeners?
Absolutely. what I really loved when I was in Japan, because I think you know me, Gloria, I'm very active and very busy most of the time. When I was in Japan, I was almost forced to slow down and calm down. There's a calmness to the culture. And I think it has to do with so many of these ancient ceremonies, particularly the tea ceremony, savoring your tea, of mixing the tea. The whole ceremony is so mindful and so patient and so calming. The tea ceremony and also ikebana, the flowers, of creating these beautiful displays of flowers. But the tea ceremony is something that I adapted in working with my clients. That in one of my offices, I had actually access to a kitchen, and I was able to serve tea when they came to see me. When a client would come sit, and we would, before we started the session, we would take a few minutes to calm down, and to calm down by drinking a cup of tea together. And I found that really helped me enormously, especially when I might have clients who were back to back and there was a lot of stress and anxiety, that I would calm down and it would clear my mind and calm me to work with the person who was there with me. And it became a ritual that many of my clients would bring tea with them for us to taste. We didn't do the Japanese tea ceremony, but we did a calming ceremony, drinking tea and just sitting quietly in a quiet meditation. And I found that to be extremely helpful. And I learned that when we were in Japan.
That's quite nice, yeah. Other things?
There's another Japanese concept, which is not one of my five, but it's incorporated into all the others, and that is doing activities that bring you self-care, that taking care of yourself. And it's all about relaxation, calmness, meditation, bringing joy and peace to your mind so that you can be healthy and improve your well-being. And this one particular concept talks about reading, gardening, taking a bath. I would encourage my people to take bubble baths, classical music. And that was just what I thought was very calming. Some people would do it in other ways, but to pursue hobbies that are very simple pleasures in your life. So for those of you who are now thinking of retiring, doing something different in your life, really think, what brings you joy? What is the reason for you to get up in the morning? And again, basically, it's something that you love to do. What is it that makes you happy? And it might be something that you haven't done in a long time. Do I have time to tell a story, Dory?
Yeah, go ahead, and then I also have another question that's come in, but tell a story. Do you have a couple of minutes? I have to honor, leave right on the hour, but if you have a few extra minutes, we can go a few extra minutes.
Okay. I had a client who was a teacher for, I'd say over 30 years. She was in her 60s and thinking of retiring, but was absolutely frightened of having nothing to do because she had been a teacher for over 30 years and never really liked it. So she spent 30 years of her life doing something that her parents had actually encouraged her to do, which was to become a teacher because she was going to get married and have children, and they felt this was a very good career for her. And it wasn't. But she stayed. She stuck it out for all those years. By the time she came to see me, she had it. But she had no idea what she will do and why she would wake up in the morning. And so we looked at things that she loved to do back when she was much younger. And she remembered that she loved to crochet little dolls and little toys for children when she was in high school as a volunteer in a hospital. And we discussed, could she do that now? And taking the small incremental steps of Kaizen, of just moving forward with mindfulness, she found a store in her neighborhood where women were learning to sew and crochet. And she went in to speak with them, again, small incremental steps. And she went in and bought some items, so she got to know them, and went back again and bought some more items and then showed them what she was crocheting. And ultimately, they asked her to come in and work with them. and to teach crocheting. And then she started 2 or 3 years later, she opened her own business teaching people how to crochet. And it's just a wonderful way of learning to use these concepts of small, not jumping into something, not running into the store and saying, I'd love to work here, how can I help? But actually taking small steps to build up a relationship, to build up connections, to build up contacts, which is one of the actually areas of Ikigai is building up relationships and supporting other people to do their best. And that's what she did. And she loved her retirement and loved her second career in her 60s. So it can be done.
Ah, lovely examples. Sheila, hope I'm pronouncing it right, from Virginia says, Renee, you're one of the most adventurous, creative people I've had the pleasure to know. And I was just wondering, knowing of your wonderful jewelry casting skills, whether you learned that art during your years in Japan.
Oh, I did learn jewelry. I studied something called mokame game, which means wood metal that looks like wood. And it's an incredible process of layering metals and then digging away to create this amazing new metal, which is such a Japanese concept and philosophy of taking your time to create something new from something old. And yes, I did study that in Japan, and I do still have many objects, and I still do have a lot of jewelry made with hokuseiga. Thank you for asking.
Great. This has just been wonderful. What final kind of takeaways would you like people to, well, first of all, how can people reach you? And you may want to mention your book, even though I know it was from a while ago, but you have a book about achieving the good life after 50 that you can mention to people, and maybe you want to mention your site, and then we'll end with any takeaway that you'd like to leave the listeners with.
Thank you for mentioning my book. It was fun to write it, Achieving the Good Life After 50, Schools and Resources Deity and Having. And I'm actually writing the second book, which will be a little different, but will include some of these Japanese concepts and philosophies. I could be reached by my website, Renée at Positivity Pro or positivitypro.com, which is my email.
Great. What final takeaway would you like to leave our listeners with as everybody goes off on their own direction?
There are so many steps and actions that we can take in the second half of life to incorporate these concepts of Japanese well-being. And I have a list of a few of them that I think really speak to these concepts of what we can do. One is, and based on actually the blue zones and people who live healthy, vibrant lives past 100, it would be to eat a healthy diet, mostly plant-based food, to be physical, to move. I know Megan mentioned that, how it's a meditation for her, and that's lovely. To be active and to have a routine and a schedule to be active, with taking yoga, walking, swimming, anything that you can do that will move your body. Not to sit too long. I've always believed that it's important to get up every 20 minutes. When we sit too long, or more than that, our bodies get stiff, and then when we get up, we blame it on age, when actually it's that we're just sitting too long. So don't blame it on age. Just get up every 20 minutes and stretch. To cultivate your social connections, to reach out to people, engage with people, and people have talked about this during the pandemic. I'm sure you've heard this story. Call people that you haven't spoken to in a long time. Nurture and embrace your friends and your friendships. Practice stress reduction exercises, meditation, calming of your mind, your body, and soul, striving for work-life balance. And if someone had asked about that, this is up to you, what you can do within your work, calm yourself down and to change the environment for yourself and your own well-being, and to be more mindful and be in the present. And if you're going to make changes in retirement, in job loss, remember kintsugi, healing. It's a beautiful metaphor that healing what is broken, a job loss, maybe retirement, moving, changing from work to another way of living. All of that needs to be looked at as a process where you build something new and beautiful for yourself in the future. And Sugi, building with goals. I think that's one of the most beautiful. I see that's my favorite concept. Not throwing things away because there is an impermanence. It focuses on impermanence, but in impermanence we can still build beautiful things from what we have.
Oh, what a lovely way to pull it together and end. Thank you so much, Renée, for taking the time and being with us today. And I look forward to getting the list of some of the resources you mentioned. And maybe as we end, it's just taking a moment. I often do this with my clients of just taking a breath in through your nose. And as you exhale silently through your mouth, you can just say, relax, be present, feel your inner strength. Kind of sounds like part of the being mindful and slowing down. Enjoy summertime. Some of you may be from places where it's wintertime now, but we have summertime here, and enjoy whatever weather you have. Hopefully it's not too disastrous. I know we're all seeing the impact of climate change, but wishing everybody health and wellness. Thank you again, Renée, for being here, and take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.